Begin. My name is Jatin, a part of Kellton Tech's family, and will be the moderator for the session today. Before we get started, I need to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the QA section of your control panel, and we will address them at the end of the webinar for 10-15 minutes. If we do not have time to respond to your questions live, we will respond to them via email. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. For those of you have that opted in to receive a link of the recording and the presentation, we will be sending that out in next few days. So before we start the webinar, I would like to spend some time talking about Kellton Tech Solutions. Kellton Tech has been a pioneer of digital transformation for the past decade, with operation across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Our clients range from startups to Fortune 500 companies, with the core strength supported through our ISO 9001 certification and CMMI Level 5 compliance. We are a family of 1500 plus and is a public traded company. Our digital services cross 6 major pillars. Digital transformation. Our digital services span IoT, social mobile, analytics, and cloud-based solutions. Digital integration. We provide integration services in support of your digital systems. Digital enterprise. We enable intelligent enterprises by leveraging end-to-end SAP solutions as an SAP Gold partner. Outsourced product development and support services, digital commerce and marketing. We enable businesses in delivering omni-channel e-commerce solutions focused on improving the overall customer experience. IoT-enabled platform solutions. We specialize in building IoT solutions, especially for the oil and gas and manufacturing industries. I have with me our panelist for the day, Mr. Kanumuri, and here is a quick round of introduction for him. Ram is Vice President Digital Integration at Kellton Tech. As an enterprise integration specialist with versatile skills and a deft problem-solving approach, he has successfully empowered several customers with scalable integration solutions that help them unlock new streams of value. Ram ventured into the space of digital integration more than a decade ago, and in his illustrious career, he has developed core critical solutions for multiple industries, including retail, logistics, oil and gas, and utilities, among more, while leveraging platforms for vendors like Software AG, MuleSoft, and IBM. With that, let us begin the official webinar session for today. Over to you, Ram.
Hey, thanks, Jatin. Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your valuable time this morning. I hope everybody are doing good. I know a lot of you are all coming out of a long lockdown, which we are not too friendly with or happy with. But definitely, I think things are looking great. Again, Jatin, thanks for that introduction. I'm Ram Kanumuri, talking about webMethods, the latest webMethods release and aspects of how to upgrade your existing webMethods or even move to webMethods.io. But before I just go there, I know Jatin had a quick introduction of our organization, but within our organization, the digital integration practice is what I quickly would like to introduce what our capabilities are at a high level. We are definitely an agnostic technology company. We support a lot of technology platforms and not only support, we are partnered with them as well, including Software AG, IBM, RPG, MuleSoft, Delbumi Informatica, and Jitterbit. As you can see, integration is our core competency, not just the application and B2B integration. We have dealt with IoT and mobile integration over the last few years as well. Of course, API management and API lifecycle management comes front and central as part of that integration modernization. Not just the core technology services, we also provide extensive strategic planning and architecture services as well, including giving out enterprise reference architecture and digital maturity roadmaps as well. Some of our capabilities go beyond integration, definitely process and BPM, process automation, any kind of extensive workflow management, rules management is also our capability. And on top of that, we have an extensive analytics capabilities as well. Not just streaming analytics, but also predictive and full-fledged analytics dashboard creation as well in various technologies, again, all the way from commercial technologies that you see on the top, but also open source technologies as well. And you can see cloud enablement is the biggest aspect of integration services. A lot of our IT domains move to cloud. I'll talk about that as well. So those are our biggest services as well, including data in the cloud and data integration architecture. Quickly today, I would like to introduce to you our agenda. Of course, we'll quickly talk about what are those trending demands in application integration and middleware for our enterprises that are moving towards what we call digital businesses. Of course, we'll talk about those integration requirements which are pervasive and how hybrid integration is becoming an enabler for such a strategy, and how API is becoming the right architectural paradigm and a force to be dealt with. We'll quickly go through what's new in Software AG's webMethods platform. Definitely we'll introduce you to the cloud components and how such cloud components can be leveraged in a hybrid deployment model. We'll talk about the specifics of our webMethods IO, the iPaaS components. We'll talk about some of the latest improvements in the new releases, especially app mesh and microservices, service grids, etc. We'll talk about 10.5's on-premise components, new things, including the Command Central micro templates. And finally, we will touch upon how to modernize or how to upgrade. There are certain do's and don'ts, best practices that we'd like to talk to you about, and also provide you some strategic advice on that direction. We will end the webinar with a few demos. We definitely would like to demonstrate some of the aspects of migration to the cloud. Especially, we have invested a lot into the on-premise ESBs. We might have already thousands of integration on-premise. How do we get them to IO, and what does it take? Yes, there could be easy things to do. There could be some mitigation that we have to do as well. Finally, we'll have a small demo on our Kellton's own home-built upgrade utilities. We have a bunch of them, but we'll at least demonstrate one to give you a perspective on what our utilities bring to the table. So going back to the first topic, how middleware and integration has evolved in the last few decades, and why it has become an enabler for the true digital enterprise of the future is very important to understand. Typically, we have seen most enterprises, yes, they have a digital initiative, or pretty much every IT initiative or objectives are oriented towards making the enterprise into a digital business. So what are those demands from such a digital business is what we have seen. First and foremost, of course, majority of our IT domains will move to the cloud. First and foremost, not only the non-COTS applications, especially Salesforce, Workday, Kronos, most of our shared services IT are already moving to the cloud in the form of adopting extensive SaaS applications. We heard from Gartner, most of the enterprises in the next 4 to 5 years would have at least 70 to 80% of their IT systems as in the form of subscription. On the other end, those IT systems that are not subscribed from, you are continuing to build, but you are building them in a new architecture. Again, that is microservices, also in cloud or a private cloud architecture. The third biggest area is IoT. Everything that an enterprise does, definitely, if not at the business model itself, majority of the operations and efficiencies are bought through IoT and mobile applications. So that is the biggest demand on maturing and converting a lot of what middleware does. Finally, but not the least, even the partner ecosystems and business partners or your organization's other extended ecosystems of customers, especially in the B2B world, we have seen those trends are evolving even faster as well. The traditional WAN and EDI needs to be moved into an aspect of partner self-serve and maybe API oriented. But last but not the least, all your data is also moving into the cloud. So these are, as you can see, you can say the requirements on top of integration nowadays in this digital drift is very pervasive. So we'll talk about how such a pervasive requirements being laid upon the middleware domain and the integration domain can be addressed. And I think the answer has been clear from many of the industry specialists, including Forrester and Gartner, that a hybrid integration platform is the answer. Yes, what are those, what does it mean by a hybrid integration platform? Or we can call it a hybrid integration strategy, because sometimes we consider that a platform is a too constrictive word. But assuming platform is not viable, can we call it a hybrid integration strategy? And I think hybrid integration strategy is the answer for all your digital integration pervasive requirements. So let's look at what are those building blocks of a typical hybrid integration platform. Yes, we still need on-premise application and data integration capability, like our traditional ESBs, ETL, and B2B tools. But we also need the integration platform as a service, iPaaS. We also need full lifecycle API management platforms. We would definitely need some integration software as a service. When integration software as a service or a cloud software as a service is for purposes of easing the burden of integration development as well, right? Like to bring about citizen developer and fast, high-speed development as well into the integration domain. And of course, the challenges that the hybrid integration platform will solve might be towards regulatory compliance. We have to have our data secure, and maybe we have to comply to privacy and protection laws of the region, of the industry. So that's a big concern and a relevant form factor for the design of our hybrid integration strategy. Of course, security and privacy has even become even more important, especially when a lot of the IT domains are moving into the cloud. Cloud-based interfacing, cloud-based interconnectivity of these applications will need the right security and privacy architecture. But as I said, moving to cloud gives benefits, but also gives you a lot of inflexibility. So that to remove the inflexibility is also the biggest premise of a hybrid integration strategy. So removing the inflexibility to allow incrementally be able to deploy what we call low-risk applications into the cloud, test the waters, but also provide an ecosystem that fosters innovation with high-speed development and change. And of course, the last but not the least, an hybrid integration strategy has to maximize the investments, both allowing it to be in a multi-cloud form where most of our IT domains will never sit in one cloud. Our SaaS applications could be in whatever cloud the SaaS provider provides. Our applications that we built might be in Azure cloud, while data that we want to move is in Amazon cloud. So it is inherent that your integration strategy has to be able to cater to what we call a multi-cloud enterprise. With that being said, what is the architectural premise for on top of your hybrid integration strategy? API is definitely the answer, and it's been out there for a long time, and it is no longer a fad. Everybody has to move towards API-oriented everything. Essentially, we can call an enterprise in a digital world has to have an API strategy. And APIs become what we call your prime force of innovation and your systems engineering, or what we can call re-engineering. As you can see here, most of our application development that we used to traditionally develop our own applications in-house, because those applications we cannot buy in the market, are now also moving into an architecture where it is agile and it is high speed, allows high speed change. And that's what you call your microservices architecture. We talked about many of our non-core applications become SaaS applications or adopted into a subscription model. We've seen a lot of data being moved into the cloud. Our traditional data warehouses, our MDMs, our transactional databases, and the recent big data infrastructure that we have adopted is everything moving into the cloud as well. You need to definitely optimize and leverage typically your elastic compute capabilities, elastic compute clouds. So that way, you have an ability to optimize your costs on your IT computing and infrastructure as well. Now, as you can see, many of these initiatives, they all rely on APIs. Your microservices, they talk to each other in APIs in a form of, a service grid, as a form of a service mesh, sidecar container. We'll talk about those of you in a bit. Your SaaS integration, everything that you subscribe from your third-party SaaS providers, they talk only in APIs. You have to integrate with them in APIs. Everything that you would want to move the data into the cloud, especially going towards your non-SQL databases, applying AI and ML on your large raw data to transform them into insightful data, they all need to be now available through APIs and services. The UI UX, traditional JavaScript is becoming your Node.js, being able to cater to and provide for what we call dynamic web generation, both for web and mobile. So your UI UX is also converting into a high-speed digital, which definitely leverages APIs as well. Majority of your partner integration or B2B integration is converting into what we call self-serve provisioned APIs. So API monetization is a big play there, where you can expose data and insights out of your enterprise into your partner ecosystem and generate revenue out of that. So most of the digital goals in a digital transformation journey is about being able to create a business model where you can monetize upon your assets and IP. And all of that revolves around being able to expose APIs that can be monetized. Again, back to our old school legacy modernization, or even any legacy systems and data that we might have in our enterprise, we need to convert that into API-led connectivity to be in line with the rest of the enterprise talking in APIs. So as you can see, to summarize, the integration requirements are pervasive. A hybrid integration strategy is fundamental, and an API is your choice of the right choice for an architectural paradigm on top of your hybrid integration strategy. With that set in mind, let's go and look into what Software AG has done with its product suite. Most of you are familiar with your webMethods on-premise ESBs. Sometimes they are used for service-oriented architecture or event-driven architecture, or even B2B integration. Now, take all your problems that you can solve on premise into the cloud, and you have your webmethods IO. webmethods IO has this three high level flavors to it. Of course, front and central in the between is our integration IO, webmethods IO integration. And it is a powerful integration platform as a service. It's not only can allow you to implement any of your integration patterns in the cloud, but it is also what we call low code, uh, um, UI based, web based, development environment that can enable what we call citizen integrators or your line of business integrators. So you don't really have to be an integration specialist to be able to leverage webmethods IO integration. Also, webmethods IO integration is a Node.js based iPaaS, which traditionally will support your strategy. If you already have a strategy to say JavaScript everywhere, especially in your UI UX projects, especially in customer experience projects, those are very friendly with a Node.js based iPaaS, which can now provision not only your microservices, but also give an environment for fast changes into your APIs that belong to those microservices. It is also a multi-tenant architecture. That means your webmethods IO integration, you can create multiple tenants that can cater to multiple silos within your business. It also provides a B2B platform and B2B capabilities. B2B, webmethods IO B2B is a separate component within the cloud, Software AG cloud, but integration and B2B are interconnected at your tenant level itself. So being able to interface your B2B into integration is seamless as well. Same thing with API. API is a separate cloud component, which provides you your portal, your gateways, and also the interfacing between them is seamless. To touch upon webmethods IO API, of course, most of you are familiar with the on-premise version of API management suite, like your center site. I'll talk about that a little later. But whatever you can do on your on-premise, you can do as much or more with your webmethods IO API. It has your API portal and an API gateway. Of course, you can your portal is your UDI registry, where all your developers and consumers can be coming to one place to participate in that lifecycle management of your APIs. You can also create new business models. API engagement is the new feature that came about in 10.5, or actually I can say in webmethods IO in the recent releases. I'll talk about API engagement a little later in detail. Of course, MicroGateway capability has come about a year ago. It definitely matured even more, being able to support various architectural paradigms in microservices, including app mesh capability or service mesh, which is on steroids, I can say. I'll talk about app mesh in a little while. Of course, your API portal and gateway, which have already been well established, have extensive improvements as well. And we'll talk about that in a few bit. Your B2B component in IO has matured a lot. It was released a year ago, but now your B2B is to a level where your traditional trading networks functionality, most of it is available now in the cloud. So that means you can now leverage the cloud component to have your trading partners connected. You can manage their profiles end to end. You can manage the connectivity endpoints as well with your trading partners. You can have a secure transmission into the cloud, and from your cloud to, if you still have your backend or ERP on-premise, you can establish that cloud to on-premise connectivity, essentially having your B2B gateway in the cloud while you still have your backend on-premise. So that is a reality now. The secure with a secure transmission, and of course you already are familiar with industry-leading partner management capabilities. You have those reusable rules available in the cloud. You have your real-time exchange, of course, extensive operational visibility. Your trading networks, transaction analysis, everything is available in the cloud right now. Not only transaction visibility, but you still have the same capability as being able to repair your messages or B2B transmissions, like hold, like resubmit, reprocess. All those capabilities are available in the cloud as well. Now, before I go dig a little deeper into the 10.5 and the goodies that are available in 10.5 web methods, I'd like to talk about the aspects of the cloud itself. Yes, we want to move to cloud, and we should understand why we have to move to the cloud. It is not a necessity anymore. It is a mandate. Most of the organizations need to leverage cloud, either in the form of subscribing to a SaaS component, or taking advantage of the elastic cloud like Amazon S3 and move all your data there to pay for what you use model is a mandate from many of the CIOs. So supporting additional capacity, for regional bursting, or sometimes you can say seasonal bursting, is also very important, so that your IT domains leverage the capacity in the cloud to its needs. The need for speed is even bigger. What that means is, traditionally, yes, we talked about IT domains. Majority of them are moved to SaaS. Yes, SaaS doesn't change as much. If you feel you need to have extensive functionalities that are beyond what you get in Salesforce, you might have to wait until that Salesforce releases the next release. You don't control the changes. But yes, majority of those applications that we continue to build, our traditional Java.NET applications, are now Azure and AWS applications. We are all microservices. The first and important factor why we choose microservices is the ability to change fast. And that is what we mean by need for speed. The ability to change fast to a speed that we can achieve innovation in our most differentiating applications is the demand, or is the mandate, to move to cloud. So APIs play a big role, and also alongside with those microservices and high-speed applications, we are also moving the data to the edge for high-speed performance as well. Now, how do we get there? How do we make our investments that we have traditionally made into our ESBs, our web methods, whether it is ESB for services bus, or EDA for event-driven architecture, or B2B? How do we move them into a cloud-based model? Yes, all your IT domains are moving to the cloud. Why shouldn't your middleware move to the cloud? So this is how you do it, right? Yes, you can adopt the hybrid cloud architecture, where you adopt various components of the web methods IO that I just talked about, and still maintain on-premise web methods integration server as well, to continue to support those IT domains that will still remain on-premise. Maybe there's a big ERP on-premise that we don't really have an immediate path to move to cloud. So what traditionally it means is, large enterprises, however mature we are into the cloud, we would still have 20-30% of our IT systems in on-premise. So an ability to establish that hybrid integration strategy where you adopt your cloud components of your middleware while keep your on-premise ability as well and establish a hybrid nature, which is also transitionary. You need to have that transition, especially because these are critical infrastructure. This is middleware. You can't overnight change and switch with a flip of a switch. So hybrid connectivity ensures a secure transmission of your data between your cloud IT domains and your on-premise IT domains. So Software AG's cloud components are typically hosted in AWS. So they are highly available, highly secure, especially in the US, it is AWS. In other global regions, it does support Azure and Baidu in certain regions as well. Now, what do you do with your existing ESB if you are adopting cloud? What happens to all those hundreds of integrations that we developed over the years? Can we still leverage them, or should we rewrite everything? The answer is lift and shift. If you would want to continue to leverage all the development investments that you have made, maybe you have created your own unique integration patterns that will still continue to leverage. Maybe there's extensive mapping that you want to still leverage. How do you use that aspect? So here you have an answer with that as well from Software AG is the lift and shift model, where you can now deploy your IS, your broker, your TN into the cloud that is managed and operated by Software AG. Yes, you might still have a problem statement where we might have to undergo an upgrade once in a while because it is not a pure IO component. It is your IS moving into a cloud that is managed and operated by Software AG. Now, that's what we call lift and shift. Lift and shift will allow you to continue to use your Designer IDE on-premise. A secure VPN connectivity will be established between the Software AG operated cloud components. And you can also establish your aspect of design once and deploy anywhere. But also there is an intermediate where you can convert some of your developed integration patterns into something that can be deployed into the IO, webMethods IO, and the cloud components as well. And our demo down the line at the end of the webinar will showcase that for you. So what is a typical hybrid integration setup when you're establishing your integration cloud adoption? Typically, your integration cloud components, whether you subscribe to webMethods IO integration or webMethods IO API or webMethods IO B2B for various purposes, those components have a hybrid connectivity into your on-premise environment. So your cloud components, especially, of course, you can have various environments within the cloud as well, your dev, test, QA, and stage or live, just like your on-premise environment. But all of them will have a hybrid connectivity established with your on-premise environment. Some of you are familiar with your reverse invoke servers or your enterprise gateways. That is still the mechanism of establishing such a hybrid connectivity. Many other iPasses, will need actually a VPN connectivity to establish that secure cloud to on-prem connectivity. But in case of Software AG, your hybrid connectivity over the internet and still secure because your on-premise would have established a reverse invoke capability. All your components that you would move to the cloud and the patterns that you would establish there will become your low-code development environment, cloud-based, and web-based. You can have multiple tenants for each environment, but also you can have multiple tenants at your business silos level as well. Your cloud environment is fully managed by software AG, so you don't have to be worried about upgrades anymore. The cloud environment is managed and maintained by software AG to its latest versions and capabilities. Of course, exposing services from cloud has an extensive intelligent routing layer. That means you expose APIs in your cloud components, and now maybe you have a need for your applications that you are developing in Azure need to connect to those APIs. Those services or APIs that are provisioned in the cloud will cater to these multi-cloud applications in an extensive intelligent routing capability that will not only allow for high availability, but also very high reliability as well. In case of lift and shift as well, you would get similar capabilities in extensive security, extensive reliability, just that your lift and shift environment is still working on your existing IS code and IS virtual machines that are available in the cloud. Yes, you need to still leverage, go through the cycle of upgrade once in a while, but what you get benefit of here is to be able to use all your old investments over the years and manage them in the cloud. Quickly, I would want to go forward with talking about some of the enhancements in the webMethods 10.5, especially the on-premise components or the managed components. Some of the major improvements have been in the API management side, especially introduction to microservices app mesh. To touch upon the API management enhancements in 10.5, you are already familiar with API portal, API gateway, API catalog, and API consumption. Your portal gateway are pretty much the same. There's not much changes. Your gateway, which was your original server-side environment, it got a little better. Your API consumption, which is your cloud streams component, has also gotten better. But the major introduction and a major enhancement and change with 10.5 is your API engagement platform. API engagement platform has provided extensive improvements wherein not only help manage API and API lifecycle, but actually give it a flavor of treating it as a product. It has a different nature to its development outreach. Of course, it is cloud native and cloud only. It will enable growth of API as a business and API as a revenue model, especially if you have extensive needs towards API monetization. Your API engagement platform is a really good, valuable addition to the stack. So the API engagement platform allows users to create and manage and judge API hackathons. That means, we're talking about now those APIs that are beyond your application APIs or your data APIs. These APIs are what we call highly reusable, digital and composite APIs, you can call them. These APIs are typically created to create that way of innovation where multiple low-lying APIs are recomposed to create much more effective and innovative APIs. And these are the APIs that we want to call them to be treated as products. So the whole aspect of engagement platform is to convert your traditional integration API development methodology into an API that is developed as a product. Every developer here who is developing an API treats it as a product. And the whole life cycle management of such an API, from its conception to design and deployment, and feedback from the usage and back into a cycle of change and innovation, is the premise for treating it as a product. But not only that, the entire life cycle or project management also becomes a little different, where we now have product owners and product managers who will be very extensively involved in being able to mature such APIs into full-fledged products. So this enables also the organization to conduct customized beta programs to test APIs in a beta state. It also allows and enhances extensive collaboration. It fosters extensive collaboration between the API developers and the consumers, and the adoption and usage of the APIs will be extensively improved. What typically you can call in this sense is, for example, a good example is your engagement platform now can expose a dashboard which will promote the most effective API of the month, or highly used APIs of the year, and maybe even showcase internal company dollars towards those API developers or the API admins. So that is the kind of ecosystem that fosters much more collaboration, much more innovation into the API based development. The next topic on an improvement on APIs is, of course, I talked about it a little bit. Now the ability of your API gateway to be able to be able to be containerized. So your API gateway has become a micro gateway as well. So it can support not just your, of course, your typical API gateway is for supporting your north-south traffic. That means you can have an API from your application or your data being exposed out into, for example, your partner or your cloud application, where your cloud application will consume and provision it, provision the data for the users. But in a micro gateway scenario, we are now talking about east-west traffic. It is for those applications that are being engineered into microservices, and the microservices themselves interact between each other to become a composite microservice with what we call east-west traffic. For catering to such microservices, orchestration is what we leverage our micro gateway for. It reduces the impact from routing all traffic through a single gateway. It allows a micro gateway to be deployed into a container alongside your application containers themselves. Now, micro gateway and a containerized micro gateway will form the basis for what we call your service grid architecture. Again, there are multiple terminologies in the industry there. Some people call it service mesh, some people call it service grid, some people call it sidecar container architecture, but there are a lot of forms of such establishing such architecture for microservices provisioning and microservices orchestration. Essentially, this micro gateway, the premise is to allow it to form the lowest footprint, or the a very small footprint, and a fast runtime, fast startup, supporting any kind of containers, not just Dockers, even Red Hat containers as well, or even IBM Bluemix containers as well. So traditionally, the micro gateway from Software AG API management platform supports any containerization and container orchestration mechanisms like Kubernetes. And of course, the service mesh architecture that the applications would have leveraged now gets an extension. It gets a little bit more help with what we call the app mesh. App mesh and its framework, I can say it's a framework, is released recently, about a few months ago. What does app mesh do is it takes your, your Docker, Kubernetes, Istio based service mesh, which establishes the core communication orchestration between microservices, and adds on top of them, or what we can call, normalizes the problem statements like, A&A, authentication and authorization, throttling, like the traffic control, any personalization that we want to do in a group of microservices and their interaction. Any, of course, you can take all your data protection policies and normalize them into one place. So what you get here is extensive reusability of these aspects like intelligent routing, data protection, visibility, traffic control, personalization, service usage, into where now your service mesh and its policies that you apply on top of service mesh can be also componentized and heavily reused. So your app mesh is nothing but your service mesh plus additional business context that you would want to normalize in highly reusable patterns. It symbolizes the convergence of service mesh, API management, and the integration technologies all into one heavily reusable package. So it is essentially the right way of APIfication of your microservices. The last but not the least improvement on 10.5 is also with your command central architecture. Some of you who are ground level admins, you already know how important command central is in the recent times, especially if you have very large environments. You need to upgrade your dev, test, and production. Each one has tens and tens of servers. Being able to create templates. Of course, we are familiar already with the previous versions. Template-based provisioning of your servers. But what's new in Command Central now is the micro templates, and micro templates in a UI. So you don't have to really have any more low-level scripting for moving your configurations, especially. So your micro template will work at the configuration level. It'll allow you to what you call establish a proven path for applying in not only your application fixes but also your DB fixes as well. It will also allow for integrating into, for example, a lot of enterprises would have secrets management as a separate component. So your encrypted passwords that you need to apply at a different environment and a different server, all those can be now managed with in a seamless way. That means you can now support a policy from your enterprise where secrets are managed by a separate group, while your production change control can still continue to deploy changes without actually controlling the secrets themselves. So those are some high-level improvements on Command Central. Of course, traditionally Command Central, alongside with deployer and WM Test Suite and few other components like ABE, are still relevant for you to establish a full-fledged DevOps maturity into your environments. Automating your code deployments or testing or roll back into production change controls. All that is now even more mature patterns can be established, or mature frameworks can be established in your DevOps needs. With that being said, let's go and talk about how do we actually modernize and upgrade quickly on some of you are familiar with the release cycle that has changed a few years ago in software AG. We now have 2 releases per year. October is your standard release. April is your innovation release. Innovation release is a low has a smaller life cycle. It's typically for when you want to adopt newer components that you don't have. You can try your innovation release, but for all purposes, majority of you would fall into adopting a standard release. Another thing that about standard release is the releases are now very incremental. That means the old school policy about, hey, let's not upgrade to the latest version. Let's wait for, or upgrade to the latest version -1. That is no longer a viable what you call suggestion. You should always why to go for the latest platform or the latest version, because you would get better support. You would have all the important features and capabilities, and you are well set for the next upgrade as well. So quickly to understand and strategize upon your upgrade methodology and even establish a strategy. First and foremost, if you are already on, we're talking about on-premise, you would want to look at your infrastructure modernization. If you have not already moved into virtual machines, definitely there's a good time. Consider that. If you're not already moved into cloud-based environments, you can look at that as a new right time to do that as well. Of course, you need to leverage newer features and capabilities every time you are upgrading, because that gives you a better bang for your buck. Most of the time, it is hard for us to justify to our business why we should upgrade. When we are able to provide them new capabilities and new improvement in the quality of service of our middleware environment, that in itself will answer the investment for upgrade. Most upgrades would go through a typical phases of standing up new environments, migrating the old components to the new, testing, then cut over. That is still a valid path, especially when we are upgrading on premise. Also, most important is you need to look for areas of SDLC improvements. If you didn't have your source control set up, maybe this is a good time to establish your GitHub. If you didn't have a full-fledged deployment automation, maybe it's a good time to look into how do we automate as we establish these new environments. Also, testing automation and any improvements that you can make at operations time changes and things like that, especially leveraging the new features that we talked about in Command Central. I know I'm probably running a little bit late. Just wanted to talk quickly on the do's and don'ts. Release to the latest, followed by enhancements. That means when you're planning, try to put your project plan in such a way that you take your existing code as is, try to move it to your latest version that you are establishing, and get the thing running before you start doing your enhancements. Another thing don't do is don't try to avoid doing other development projects while you're doing an upgrade project, right? So that's a very important thing. On the upgrade path side, when you're actually working on low-level tasks, definitely leverage DB configurator. Your web method schema setup and things like that will be much more easier. And what you don't want to do is don't move configurations manually. You have now a good setup in the Command Central to leverage that so that things will be smoother. During typical cutover time, the production change time, definitely, yes, prove it in your lower environment. Of course, make sure your rollbacks are also proven. One thing that you don't want to do is don't test for your HA during the cutover itself. You make sure you do your HA testing. Even if you have to do your HA testing in your new production environment, do it before you start doing the cutover or a week or two ahead of your actual production cutover. So with that being said, I know we have talk about utilities. These are the utilities, an advantage portal that can showcase to you what are the rectification work that you have to do on, say, some of the change services and deprecated services. Environment verification compares your old environment to the new, making sure your configurations are consistent. A performance monitor that can compare the old environment's performance results against your new environment's performance. Those are the few of the Kellton Tech upgrade utilities that you can leverage. We typically bring them on to the project as well. We leave them with the customer to on go and leverage them in the future. This is a slide that gives you a set of considerations, right? Typically, I know, as I said earlier, I was talking about when we have to upgrade to 10.5, why should we upgrade to 10.5? What are the reasons? These are top level considerations on why we should need to go to a latest version. Also on the right, you have considerations on why you would want to migrate your on-premise into the cloud version. So these are top level considerations. I'm not going to go through all of them. We'll have my team forward you this deck so that you could have them handy for your reference when you have to establish that conversations with your business stakeholders. With that, I would want to go to the demos. Let me bring up the demo quickly. In the first demo, we're going to do what is, talk about the hybrid nature of the webMethods platform.
Hi everyone. In this video, I am going to demonstrate the hybrid integration feature of webMethods. In this video, we will see what is hybrid integration, steps involved in creating hybrid integration, functionality of database and Salesforce services from on-premise to cloud account. What is hybrid
Let me jump
integration?
in a little bit.
Easily from any device like mobiles, tablets, etc. It provides various out-of-the-box application connectors that can be drag and dropped easily. Also provides on-premise connectivity with webMethods integration server. Now, let's look at the steps involved in creating hybrid integration. To create hybrid integration, we need to log into the integration server instance. To log in, let's go to the web browser. Here is the integration server instance. And now go to the webMethods cloud menu, where we can find 4 tabs: settings, accounts, applications, and Docker services. First, we have to configure the webMethods cloud account details in settings tab by providing username, password, and cloud URL. After providing the details, click on update settings. Now we have to create an on-premise account in the accounts tab. Here, click in create on-premise account and provide the details: alias name, description, stage, and user or administrator. After filling that, click on test account settings. Once the account is tested and it is successful, we can enable the account. So the integration server instance account, which is created now, is ready to receive the request from integration cloud. Now we have to create the application that we want to run on webmethods.io integration and then upload the created application on webmethods.io integration. As now we are ready to deploy the on-premise application to cloud, let's look at it. To create and deploy the application into webmethods.io, navigate to the webmethods cloud and then applications tab. Click on define webmethods cloud application. Here provide the display name and description so that the applications that are deployed to cloud will be displayed using the display name that we have provided here. After providing the details, now select the application. And after selecting the application, click on Save Changes. Now the application which we have selected will be displayed over here. Once the application is displayed over here, we can deploy it to cloud using the upload icon. As the on-premise service is successfully deployed to cloud, now let's look at the functionality of database and Salesforce services from on-premise to cloud account. Let's go to the designer. This is the on-premise flow service that I have created that inserts the data into on-premise database. Let's run this service and pass the input fields. After providing the input fields, let's look at the execution results. As we see that service is executed, the data is inserted into the on-premise database. To make sure whether the data got inserted into the database or not, let's go to the database and refresh the database table. As we see the employee ID 3001 that we have provided while running the service in Designer, it got replicated here. So the functionality is working in the on-premise. Let's check the same functionality in the cloud as well. So check the functionality. Let's go to the integration cloud. After logging into the integration cloud, let's open webmethods.io integration. This is the workflow that I have created for insert adapter service. Here, as we see, that is the deployed application from IS. I have connected the output of this service through a notification email. Now let's pass the inputs to the fields that has to be inserted into the insert database. After passing the data fields, save the workflow and then execute the workflow to see the execution results. Whenever we execute the workflow, the webmethods.io integration will send request to the integration server to execute the added application. Integration server will in turn send back the execution response to webmethods.io cloud platform. As we see over here, by navigating between the input and output tabs, we can see the data is successfully inserted into the database table that is residing on the on-premise. Let's check whether the data got inserted successfully or not. Let's go to the database and refresh the database table. We can see here that the data is successfully inserted into the database. Now let's compare the functionality of Salesforce services from on-premise to cloud account. These are the services that I have created for inserting data into Salesforce cloud objects from integration server and to retrieve the data from Salesforce cloud objects. When we run the insert service, we will provide the details. After passing the details, let's wait for the execution results. Here is the execution result. As we see the transaction namespace message as true, the data got successfully inserted. To make sure the data is successfully inserted into the Salesforce, let's go to the Salesforce account developer console. Let's click on refresh grid so that the new data will be appeared here. After clicking on this, click on open detail page. In this page, we can see the detailed field names of the cloud objects. As we see the details over here, the details which we have inserted while running the service in the on-premise designer is the same. So we can say that the data got inserted successfully into the Salesforce cloud objects. Now let's compare the functionality in the integration cloud as well. So let's log into our webmethods integration cloud. This is the workflow that I have created that inserts the data into the Salesforce cloud objects. In the workflow, let's pass the input fields. After passing the input fields, let's save the workflow and run the workflow to see the execution results. As the execution is completed, let's go here and check the execution logs. By navigating to the output tab, we can see whether the data got inserted. Yes, we have inserted the data into the cloud object successfully. To make sure, let's go back to the Salesforce developer console and again refresh the grid. And click on the new TNS ID and click on open detail page. As we see the fields over here, the data which we have passed in the webmethods.io cloud is the same. So we can say that webmethods.io integration can easily connect with the Salesforce cloud objects as well and run same as on-premise in the cloud as well. Now let's go back to the designer and compare the functionality of select adapter services that retrieves the data from the on-premise database and the select adapter services that retrieves the data from the Salesforce cloud objects as well. To do that, let's go back to the designer again. These are the select adapter services that selects the employee data from the employee table that resides in the on-premise database based on the employee ID that we pass while running this service. Let's check the functionality of the service by running this. Let's pass the input fields. As we see the execution result, we have successfully retrieved the employee data with employee ID 3001. Now let's compare this select adapter service that retrieves the data from on-premise database in the webmethods.io integration cloud as well. To do that, let's go back to the webmethods.io integration cloud. This is the workflow that I have created for selecting the data from the on-premise database. And this is the on-premise application that is deployed from the integration server instance. Now let's pass the employee ID to this. After passing the input field, let's save the integration. Now the integration is saved successfully. Let's run this integration now. When we run this integration, the integration cloud sends the request to the integration server instance in the on-premise. Let's see the execution log. We have passed the input field employee ID as 3001. Let's check whether it have retrieved the data from on-premise data or not. Yes, we got the employee details with the employee ID that we passed, employee name, technology, and the location. So the select adapter service is also working the same in on-premise and the cloud as well. Now let's check the select adapter service functionality of Salesforce Cloud Objects. This is the select adapter service that retrieves the data from the Salesforce Cloud Objects based on the TNS ID, which is transaction namespace ID that is created while inserting the data into the cloud objects. Let's run this service to check whether it is retrieving the data successfully or not. Let's pass any of the previously inserted TNS ID and see for the execution. Here is the execution results. Let's check the results. Yes, we have passed the TNS ID for the employee ID 3001 and we have retrieved the data successfully. This is the retrieved data. Now, let's check this functionality of retrieving the data from Salesforce Cloud Object in the webmethods.io integration cloud. Let's go back to the webmethods.io integration cloud. This is the on-premise service that is deployed into the cloud from the on-premise integration server instance. Let's pass the TNS ID over here, and then after passing the TNS ID, save this workflow. We have to save the workflow every time so that the refreshed values will be taken. Now execute the workflow. As you see the blue dots over here, we can say that the execution integration is completed successfully. Now let's check the execution logs over here. Click on that, and by navigating between the output tab, let's see. Yes, it retrieved the employee details with the TNS transaction ID, which we have passed while running this workflow. So
I'm going to stop at that. Just wanted to give you a summarized point of view from the demo. I know that was a recorded demo. We just wanted to ensure that everything will go smooth. To the interest of time, what you have seen here or heard here is there is a database service that can be, that is actually acting on an on-premise database. And there's a Salesforce service that is connecting to Salesforce and doing some operations on Salesforce API. Both these services are developed on-premise, pushed into the cloud version, and executed in both places, on the premise and in the cloud, and it achieved the same results. So what it entails is development can be done anywhere, and can also these integrations can be run anywhere, on-premise versus in the cloud. And what you see here is the cloud execution is seamless when you have such a hybrid integration setup. The next demo is actually on our upgrade utility. These are, as I said, our own internally built homegrown utilities that we bring to the table for upgrade projects. This specific utility, again, for the interest of time, I will stop, not do this. We'll take some Q&A. But just to give you a background on this utility, it is a utility to recognize changed and deprecated services of the current version that we are going to. And this utility will typically be run on your old environment and the entire code base and code sets of your entire environment. And it will give you all the services that might be affected because those services have been changed or deprecated in the newest version or the latest version of webMethods. What that allows is, it gives you a planning time report, where now you can ensure that as and when you reach the stage within your upgrade project, you need to establish some effort for changes and code rectification or betterment. Those are all now identified up ahead with this utility. With that being said, just would like to open up for questions at this time.
Yeah.
I seem to have a question from Gurbachan saying, do you not face latency issues if application running on-premise and the integration is on the cloud? Latency issues is a big, important question. Definitely we have to address it. I'm not saying that there will not be any latency at all. Of course, it all depends on how far and what's the distance between your cloud environment that is provisioned in webMethods Cloud and your on-premise environment. But I would say nowadays, a lot of the latency issues and the bandwidth issues have been solved. We can probably be well guaranteed that the latency issue between couple of data centers and the latency issue between the cloud and your on-premise should not be that much, especially when we are talking about low-level, small footprint APIs or services. If you are handling very large data sets, bulk files, yes, you might run into some latency issue, but also that can be mitigated with bettering your infrastructure and connectivity as well. Go ahead, Jatin. Are you saying you have 2 more questions?
Yep, I had a couple of more requests to answer it quickly, Ram. So one is the upgrade from the web methods, for a version like 9.7 or 9.9 to the latest, let's say 10.5 direct, or it has to go through an intermediate version?
Intermediate version. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I would say we are on 10.5 right now. If you're migrating from say 10.1 to 10.5, there is nothing intermediate. A lot of the things are straightforward. I would say even from any version of your 9 version to 10.5, also we don't need an intermediate. Only time that you need an intermediate is if you are still on a very old version, maybe 8, maybe 7. And especially even in those cases, when you have say a complex data set in your existing old environment, maybe you have a TN database and you have your all historical transactions, and you have a need that those historical transactions need to be now available in your new 10.5. So only in such scenarios where you have to migrate from say a much older version like 7 or 8, and you have a BPM or TN databases and their historical data that needs to be migrated, yes, we will then need an intermediate stage. And typically that intermediate stage is also only for establishing certain intermediate data schemas so that we can have the right conversion of the data as it is being migrated from the oldest versions to the new version. But other than that, most of the upgrades, especially from 9 version and any of the old 10 versions, it is a seamless upgrade. You don't need an intermediate version in between at all.
Okay, thanks, Ram. We have some other intriguing questions also, but as we are, running short of time, so we'll get that answered via email, just after this webinar. Ram, thank you so much. That is all the time we have. For all the questions who can't be answered in this session, will be notified later by email. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out to the recorded version of this webinar in the next few days. Thank you again for joining us. You have been a fantastic audience. Thank you, Ram. Thank you all, and stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jatin.
Thanks.